Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're celebrating a birthday today. That's right. We're inviting all of our Reading with Your Kids family members to help us celebrate the birthday of the Buddha with our conversation with Andrea Miller, the author of The Day the Buddha Woke Up. And what a better way to celebrate birthdays or any kind of occasion, but with great food. And so our friend Elizabeth Rudd is going to be in here later on to teach us how to make a delicious spring roll. And please don't forget that we're looking for a few great schools, public libraries, special events, churches to host performances of my live educational magic shows. My magic shows use magic, illusions, comedy, and a whole lot of totally interactive audience participation to celebrate the fact that each and every one of us is unique and that we all have the right to be respected, to feel safe where we worship, where we go to school, and that we all have a responsibility to help others feel safe and respected too. It really is a fun way to celebrate the fact that the magic between us really is kindness and respect. You can learn more about my live shows by going to my personal website, jedlie.com, Jedlie, jedlie.com, or by going to readingwithyourkids.com/live, readingwithyourkids.com/live. Joining us on the line right now from one of my favorite places in the world. We were just chatting about some of the places I love in her city. Halifax and Nova Scotia in Canada. Beautiful, beautiful part of the world. Our guest today is the author of The Day the Buddha Woke Up. Please welcome to the show, Andrea Miller. Andrea, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited. I had a lot of fun reliving some of my memories and sharing some of those memories with Andrea. Nova Scotia is such a beautiful, beautiful place. And the neat thing is I didn't tell Andrea that I am from Boston, and there's a really beautiful connection between the people of Halifax, Nova Scotia, and the people of Boston.
That's true. I know that.
Yeah.
You helped us a lot when we had a disaster here.
Yeah, and it was, and I had always heard that there was this connection, and I know because the people of Nova Scotia always send this beautiful tree, beautiful, huge tree down at Christmas time to Boston. And I knew a little bit about it, about the fact that there was a disaster in Halifax. But my friend Robert Lamar, who is a mentalist based in Halifax in Nova Scotia and is fairly famous throughout Canada, he told me the story. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that story?
About the disaster?
Yeah, just so folks know.
Yeah. Well, there were two ships that collided in our harbor, and you know, this history in quite some time, but you know, many thousands of people died. Mm-hmm. And it was during the winter, so it was also very hard. You know, when people's homes have exploded, they were left very destitute. Mm-hmm. So it was wonderful that the people of Boston really helped us.
Yeah, and when Robert was telling me the story about these ships colliding and that were filled with ammunition or filled with munitions, and it exploded, and he was telling me the devastation, and to hear it was quite moving. But then to be in Halifax, probably about a year later, and to actually see the scope of how big a part of the city was really destroyed.
It was an incredible explosion. You know, we have one of the deepest harbors in the world, and there was a moment when the explosion was happening that you could actually see the bottom of the harbor, mm-hmm. because the explosion was that strong. Mm-hmm. It moved the water.
Just incredible, and I'm really happy that the citizens of my city. I can't say me because it happened back in the happened long before I was born, but the people of Boston at that time, I guess we were the closest major city to Halifax. which is kind of surprising sometimes to realize. But we were able to share and send clothing and food. And like you said, it was in the wintertime, and Halifax it's quite isolated out there in the Atlantic. And so I'm really wonderful that my city stepped up and helped out. And I think that's in some way kind of a great way to lead into the story of the day the Buddha woke up, because faith is, one of the things that unites many different faiths around the world is just this idea of love and helping each other and being part of one wonderful human family.
I agree.
So tell us about the day the Buddha woke up.
Well, it is the story of the Buddha's life and also the Buddha's teachings, and it's a board book. So it's aimed at very young children. Obviously, that means there aren't a lot of words in this book. It's actually fewer than 200 words. So I had to be very pithy in describing, this quite long biography of the Buddha and also his teachings. And so I actually relied a lot on the art to tell some of that story as well. But I did want to mention about the book that it is about the Buddha's life and the Buddha's teachings, but I like to think that it's not just for Buddhist families. I think that at this point, we need to have more religious education. We need to know about other people's religions. So I think it's just good for religious education, whether or not you're a Buddhist.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I was sharing with Andrea before the show. I came, as people who listen to the show probably know, I am a Christian and Catholic, and I had a really neat religious education, even way back when I was a kid, many decades ago. The people who introduced me to my faith were very open and encouraged me to learn about other faiths, and really kind of stress that whole part of Christianity, that we are all one family, that we are all connected as one human family. And I've done studies of Buddhism, and it really is a fascinating story. One of the things, first off, I'm fascinated that you're able to tell any part of that story in only 200 words. That's pretty amazing. Because I think,
thank you.
I think I can't recall his name right. The Buddha was actually a real person, and I think his name is, if you just use his name, that probably ate up about a tenth of your word limit.
Siddhartha. I just refer to him as Siddhartha.
Okay. Well, so you left out his last name. Okay, so that was one way to keep that pithy.
Yeah.
Oh, well, tell us what. And I agree. It's wonderful for us to be able to know about other faiths, because it's a great way for us to realize that we have way more in common than we have that separates us.
Very true.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the faith and what's most important about it, because with 200 words, you obviously distilled this very rich and vibrant faith down to some very, very important points. So what kind of points did you share when the Buddha woke up?
Well, first of all, I told quite a bit about his life story. And do you want me to get into that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, sure. So the Buddha was born about 2,600 years ago, and we often say that he was born a prince. Maybe he was just born in a fairly wealthy family with some political power. But let's say he was born a prince. And his father really wanted to really shelter him, because there was this prophecy before he was born. And the prophecy was that he would either grow up to be a great political leader, so like a king, or he would grow up to be a really powerful spiritual leader, a really important spiritual leader. And his father, being a king, wanted Siddhartha to follow in his footsteps. So he tried to shelter him in every way that he could. He gave him every sort of pleasure and enjoyment in life, and he kept him away from any sort of suffering. he was hoping that if he didn't see suffering, then he wouldn't feel inclined to go down a spiritual path. But eventually, Siddhartha grew up, and he ventured outside of the palace, and he saw 3 sights. The first one was he saw a sick person. The second one he saw was that he saw a old person. And the third sight was that he actually saw a dead body. Mm. And this was his first time seeing this sort of suffering. And it was shocking to him. And he just didn't know how to process this. And it came as a real shock to him that he was also of the nature to grow old and to get sick and to die. And so was everyone else in his life. We all are. Mm-hmm. But then he saw a fourth sight. And the fourth sight was that he saw an ascetic. So he saw like a spiritual seeker. And there were, at this time in India, as there still are actually, and in the Indian subcontinent, I should say, because this was actually Nepal. The Buddha was born in Nepal and grew up in Nepal. There were a lot of these spiritual seekers. And they were kind of like hippies. Mm-hmm. In a sense, like they kind of were dropped out and were trying to really figure life out, like what was really important in life, what's really important in life, and why we suffer, and what can make us truly happy. So the Buddha was inspired to leave home and become one of these spiritual seekers. And so he did that. And for years he tried different methods to try to really get to the heart of these important questions. And he actually ended up trying this very extreme method, extreme asceticism. And so he wasn't eating, and he was meditating all the time. He was eating maybe like 1 grain of rice a day. And he was getting skinnier and skinnier and skinnier. And finally, it just sort of hit him that he wasn't going to attain enlightenment by living like this. He was actually just going to kill himself. Mm-hmm. So he decided that what was needed was the middle way. And that was so not the luxury of his youth, that is not the way to spiritual attainment, and not like really denying ourselves. That's not the way to spiritual attainment either. We have to take care of ourselves. Mm-hmm. So, and at this time, there was this young woman who, long story short, she thought he was a tree spirit, and she brought him over some rice gruel, and he ate that, and suddenly he had the strength to get up and go sit under a tree, and now we call that tree the Bodhi tree. And he sat under that tree, and he sat there until he attained enlightenment. And he then came up with something that we call the Four Noble Truths, and that's the foundational teaching of Buddhism. And then he went on, after attaining enlightenment, to teach, starting with the Four Noble Truths, and he taught for many decades, until he was in his 80s, when he kind of anticlimactically died of food poisoning. So that's his life.
Fascinating. It really is a fascinating story, and every time I hear it, you learn a little bit more about this life and about his quest to seek enlightenment and what that can tell us. How were you? I guess the question that I have is: were you born like I was born into a Catholic family, or were you drawn to Buddhism in a different way?
I was born actually to a Catholic family, uh-huh. but not a very religious family at all. Mm-hmm. They're more like just Catholic in name kind mm-hmm. of family. And then I ended up taking a Chinese and Japanese religions class in university. And I learned about Buddhism, and, I wasn't taken with it at all. It seemed so dreary. Buddhism, I think, has a marketing problem. When I was talking to you about the Four Noble Truths, or like mm-hmm. the foundational teachings of Buddhism, the first noble truth is there is suffering. Mm-hmm. And that sounds pretty dire. It's a little bit of a translation problem. The word suffering is the translation for the word dukkha. And suffering's just not really quite the right word for it. It can be suffering, like, get your foot cut off sort of suffering. But it's also just the little dissatisfaction that we always feel. Things are not quite 100% right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it would be perfect, but, or maybe you do get exactly what you want in life. Maybe something is perfect, but then you have this little fear of losing
Mm-hmm.
it, or maybe it's a huge fear. And then maybe you do lose it. So there's all these different types of suffering that range from extreme to minor.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, that's not a very happy message. You know, if you're looking for spiritual ecstasy, that doesn't sound like a really great message. There is suffering. But actually Buddhism does have good news in it too, because that's the first noble truth. And then the second noble truth is that it's why we suffer. And it's that we suffer because of our attachment, our clinging.
Mm-hmm.
We have all of these things that we want, and we either reject things or sort of clamp onto them. We want to maintain them. And it's that clinging that makes us suffer. It's not enjoying things. Enjoying things is not a problem. And in fact, you really should relish the wonder of your life. But just being able to let it come and let it go.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really the third noble truth, is that it is possible not to suffer. It is possible to find happiness and to not cling. And then the fourth noble truth is sort of the recipe for doing that. It's called the Eightfold Path, and it's sort of 8 steps, although not steps as in that's the sequence. They're more like a wheel. Mm-hmm. You know, if you understand one, or you can really do one of them, you've got them all in some sense. And so that's the Four Noble Truths. And I just wasn't really that taken with it when I was in university.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I was too young for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I encountered it later, and I don't know, maybe I was just at the right stage in my life where I could say, yeah, this actually isn't dreary. This is actually just the way it is.
I love hearing folks' story, and love hearing how folks make very, very important decisions in their life. And I love that you had this, you were searching, and you had an open mind, and you found something that seems to have brought you a lot of peace and joy.
Mm-hmm. It has.
Yeah. And
it has. I mean, obviously I'm not enlightened. I'm not the Buddha. I'm still working at it.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things you mentioned that, Buddhism is kind of presented in a dreary way. Your book is not dreary at all. The artwork in your book is very unique. It's not artwork that we typically find in in a lot of children's books, but it's absolutely perfect for this subject. It really is. It's beautiful and unique, and I think totally fits the message.
Oh, thank you. I really like it too. It's by a really talented artist named Rima Fujita.
Great. How did you connect with Rima?
Well, my day job is I work at a Buddhist magazine called Lion's Roar, mm-hmm. and I was writing a profile of an organization down in New York, actually, the Tibet House, and they had an exhibit of her work there, and so I happened to just be scrolling there, looking around on their page, and I was looking at her art, and I was like, wow, I love this. If I ever write a children's book, I want her to illustrate it. Mm-hmm. And then, but we didn't actually have any sort of connection. And then she happened to write to the magazine, and I received that email. So we've been in touch ever since. And so when I had the idea to do this board book, I asked her if she wanted to do it, and I was so thrilled that she said yes.
Wonderful, wonderful.
She's a very serious Buddhist practitioner.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this is it's a great book. It like I said, the colors for a board book for young kids, I think it's really going to catch their attention. And I think it's a great way for families to start, whether you're a Buddhist family, a Christian family, Jewish family, whether you have no faith at all. It's a great way to learn a little bit more about a faith that so many people around the world hold dear. The more we know about our brothers and sisters around the world, the better, because knowledge, I think knowledge is really power and really helps us grow together. And like we've said in a couple of places, I think there are a lot more things that we share than separate us.
Exactly.
Yeah. If folks want to know more about you and about your book, do you have a website that they can visit?
I don't have a website. You can see a lot of my writing on the Lions Roar website. If you look me up on Lions Roar, I have many articles.
Mm-hmm. And that's the Lions Roar magazine?
Yes.
The Lions Roar, and I'm imagining lionsroar.com?
Yes.
Well, we want to encourage everybody to check out lionsroar.com to find out a little bit more about Andrea and her work, and also to find out a little bit more about Buddhism, because I'm sure after as you're reading these books, and I would encourage you, if you're reading The Day the Buddha Woke Up with your kids when they're into board books, you might want to read something else to them as they get older so that their understanding grows with them.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, we've had a lot of fun speaking to the author of The Day the Buddha Woke Up, Andrea Miller. Andrea, thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
In just a moment, Elizabeth Rudd from Compass and Fork will be in here to teach us how to make some delicious spring rolls with our kids. What a great way to celebrate the Buddha's birthday or any kind of occasion, but by cooking with our kids. Before she does, we want to remind you to check out our readingwithyourkids.com website. There you can find out all about the show. You can find past shows, find links to our blog. If you're the author, you can click on the contact page, let us know about your great book. We'll let you know how you can be a guest on the show. And if you are an author and you're looking for a great way to help promote your book, make sure you check out our Certified Great Reads page. Right now, we travel all around the world to visit with our friend Elizabeth Rudd. We're really, really excited. The feedback from our guest's first visit has been so great, and we're really excited to have her back. She is the driving force behind compassandfork.com, an excellent blog and website you need to check out. She's coming to us from Melbourne in Australia. Please welcome back Elizabeth Rudd. Elizabeth, how are things in Melbourne today?
It's a bit of a rainy day here, but other than that, it's fantastic. We need the rain, actually.
Excellent, excellent. And it's summer in Melbourne right now, right?
It is. Yes, we have Christmas in the middle of summer.
Well, I woke up here in Boston with a it's not but 15 degrees Fahrenheit, which I guess is probably -5 or 6 in Celsius.
Yes, it never even gets that cold in Melbourne.
Yes, well, good for you folks. So one of the things about Elizabeth is she's traveled around the world, and when she travels, she likes to delve in not only into the culture, but into the food of a country. And today, where are you taking us?
Today, we're going to go to Thailand.
Ooh, Thailand. Awesome. Thai food is popular here in the States, but I'm guessing that the Thai food we eat here in the States is probably a lot different than the food folks eat in Thailand.
Yes, it is. Thai people like their food very, very spicy.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of the food is not quite that spicy when we get it in other places. Luckily, if you ever travel to Thailand, you can request that your food's not that spicy.
Oh, good. That helps. Would they see somebody like me with my pale skin and receding hairline and offer to make it less spicy for me in case I wasn't aware of that?
Yes,
oh,
most
good.
of them will.
One of the earliest memories, we've been hosting international kids here in our home, and we hosted a young woman from Zhejiang in China, and she came and we took her out for dinner, and it just happened we went to a national Chinese restaurant chain, and she sat down and she saw all the Asian kind of themed artwork and whatnot. And when the food came out, she just looked at me and she said, "This is not Chinese food." And I said, "Well, it's what we call Chinese food."
Yes, it is very interesting. Chinese food is one of those that has many adaptations around the world,
Sure.
as does Indian food. And even from country to country that's outside of that country, what we call Indian food, even Chinese food, you don't even see the same favorites in different countries.
And I imagine, too, a country like China is so vast that the food must be very different from one region to another.
Yes, same with like India. Yeah, very, very different. Even Thailand, it's very different from even the north to the south because the weather varies. Vietnam's another one with big variations between the north and the south. Probably originally due to the fact of what's available in the local area, because this is before there was the ability to move food around all over the place.
You know, I think that's one thing we can talk to our kids about is just the fact that we're living in a time where we have access to food that's incredible. I remember, we only had oranges at certain times of the year when I was growing up, and we only had apples at other times of the year. Now you can go to a typical supermarket and find just about everything all year long.
Yeah, I can remember, and I've talked about this with my friends too, like during the winter we used to eat more canned vegetables because there were no fresh vegetables. That's what canned vegetables were for. Versus now, you're exactly right. We can go to the grocery store and find a lot of whatever you want all of the time.
So, yeah, and that's just one of the conversations we can have with our kids to help them understand how things have changed and how small the world is getting. And because the world is getting so small, it's really, really helpful to start to get to know different peoples. And what a great way to get to know peoples than to get to know their food.
Correct.
Yeah.
Food varies widely around the world, and it is usually a big reflection of the culture.
So tell us, what can we learn about Thailand through making this dish that you're going to teach us tonight?
Okay, well, one of the really interesting things about Thailand is they value eating quickly. They value eating in something they can carry around. If you actually go to Thailand, it's very interesting. Most people do not cook at home.
Wow.
They eat out. And they eat out and eat what is normally referred to as street food. So you can eat quite well out on the street somewhere in Thailand for a couple of dollars. There are very common meals that are found. It could be a noodle dish. It could be meat on a skewer, like a sauté stick, or it can be something like a spring roll. But part of why a lot of their food has actually developed is because it is easy to eat out on the street. So I can hold a spring roll in my hand and eat it when I'm outside. I don't need plates and dishes and things in the house. Another reason a lot of them eat outside is because it's quite a warm climate. It's in the tropics. And cooking in a kitchen, like if you had an oven, would heat up the entire house. So most of them don't have an oven. It's wok-style cooking, or it's deep frying, which doesn't heat up the kitchen.
Fascinating. That's, I never made those connections between the culture and the climate, and it makes perfect sense.
Yes. Yeah, it does. It's interesting, isn't it? Because you don't really think about it. You just go, oh, yeah, that's Thai food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are we going to cook today?
Today we're actually going to make some spring rolls.
Oh,
They're a bit fun to do with kids. Rolling up the spring rolls, putting in the ingredients inside, and then being able to eat them at the end.
Awesome.
And it's one of those you can adapt to put inside a spring roll whatever you want. So pretty much, anything your kids will eat, you can put inside a spring roll.
Wow. Now, are we going to make the wrap from scratch, or are we going to go with a pre-made wrap?
We're going to go with a pre-made wrap.
Okay.
So you just need to find some egg roll wrappers, spring roll wrappers at the store. You can usually find them in an Asian grocer. If you have a Whole Foods near you, you can usually find them there. And if you are somewhere where it's difficult to find Asian ingredients, you can actually order them off Amazon and just have them delivered to the house.
Yes. I've actually, with that student I was speaking of, we actually made egg roll and dumpling wrappers from scratch. It was a blast. It takes forever.
It does. You can make them, and we have made rice paper rolls quite a few times. In most of Vietnam, they are made from scratch, but they are... Yeah, they're work.
They work. They're good, but the store-bought wraps work just as well, and it's a lot easier and a lot quicker. All right, so we have the store-bought wraps.
Yes. So start with the store-bought wraps, and we are going to take them, and we're going to first probably get your ingredients together for what you're going to put in them. There are two variations actually on our site. There is one that is made with pork, ground pork, which is usually one as well that kids will eat. And then there's another one that is banana spring rolls. So if you want to make a dessert version of them, you can use bananas in them as well.
Wow, banana! I am intrigued. Okay, so what do we do?
Okay, so let's start by getting the ingredients together for the filling.
Okay.
So we're going to use glass noodles, which are sometimes called vermicelli noodles. They are rice noodles that are very thin. Again, you can usually find these in your grocery store in like the Asian section. Again, if you're somewhere where it's difficult to find Asian things, again, you can just order these online. They're very quick to make. You just pour hot water over the top of them. And that's it. So for a couple of minutes, and then you pull them out, and they're done. We're going to use 1 tablespoon of chopped garlic. So you can do this from a fresh clove or chopped minced garlic if that's your preference to use with children. A little bit of red or green cabbage. This gives it a nice little crunch on the inside and some lovely color if you use red cabbage. Shred up some carrots. Again, that should be one that you can do with the kids, the cabbage and the carrots. We use bean shoots in them as well, bean sprouts. Up to you whether or not you want to use the bean sprouts. Again, if you're near someplace that sells Asian, buying these fresh in the grocery store is relatively easy. And if not, they're just optional. You can leave them out. Now, an interesting thing about Thai cooking is they very much believe that there are 4 tastes: salty, sweet, bitter, and hot, or spicy as we sometimes refer to it. And that most things are a balance of those things. So you will find that almost every Asian dish has a little bit of sweet in it. In the case of this recipe, it is a little bit of a tablespoon of raw sugar put into your sauce. If you want to leave the sugar out, that's okay as well.
Wow, cool.
Yeah.
And again, this is a great way to get the kids involved. Talk about it. Do we put this in? Do we put this much in? And just starting that conversation with our kids, empowering them, helping them make decisions. And it really makes a difference in kids' lives. It's just the idea that a grown-up is listening to them and letting them make decisions is a big deal for a little one.
It is. It is. And because you can do this, you can repeat this recipe again and again and keep changing up what you put in it as well. So, today you might make pork ones. The next time you might make beef ones. The next time you might make vegetarian ones. You can use shrimp in them. You can just keep changing this recipe, and experiment and see which ones the kids like best.
Yeah. And again, have those conversations. Well, what do we feel like tonight? What have we eaten? And does that go into what decision we're making in terms of what we're putting into the egg roll? Spring roll, I'm sorry. So we have the ingredients, we made the decisions, we had the kids help us. What do we do now?
We toss these in a wok or in a pan. A pan will work fine if you don't have a wok. If you do have a wok, it's a great way to talk about woks and which kinds of cultures use woks. If you're in Thailand, you'll see everybody out on the street cooks in a wok. That would be their go-to pan for everything. It doesn't matter Even things we wouldn't think to cook in a wok, they cook in a wok. So we take the noodles, we take all the vegetables, and we toss them quite quickly with a little bit of soy sauce, sugar, a little bit of water for about a minute. All we're doing is softening these up and warming them a bit. And that's going to be the mixture that we put inside the egg wrapper roll. So if you've browned the pork ahead of time and then toss the pork into that same mixture. So this is your filling all in one, that you've just slightly warmed up.
Great.
So once that's done, you can actually take and divide the mixture up into 8 equal parts, which again is a great thing to do with kids so they can, see how much is going to go into each one and even them up themselves. Take the spring wrapper roll, and put the mixture inside. If you go to our site that actually shows you how to actually roll these as well, there's pictures of it step by step on how to roll them. But you're just going to kind of fold them over, much like you'd almost fold a burrito. You fold the ends, then you roll it up, and then you put a little bit of egg along to seal it on the last, edge. That'll make it stick when you fry them.
Excellent. So we have it all rolled up, and then we fry it. Do we fry it deep fry or olive oil?
We do deep fry.
Okay.
And you can use either coconut oil or olive oil either. They fry quite quickly. And again, you deep fry. Most people would use the wok, right? Or the pan that you've already used. So just heat up a bit of oil. You can reuse that oil for something else at the end as well.
Awesome. Well, this recipe is going to be available on our blog and on our show notes, and it's also available on compassandfork.com.
Yes.
Excellent.
And again, look for the other variation for the banana spring rolls if you want to try them as a dessert.
And again, a great activity as you're making this or as you're starting to make this is pull out that map and find Thailand on a map and then find it and see where it is in relation to wherever you are in the world.
Yes.
Yes. And while we're at it, check out where our friend Elizabeth is down in Melbourne in Australia.
Yes. Look at the land down under.
There you go. All right. We've been talking today to Elizabeth Rudd. She is a driving force behind compassandfork.com. Make sure you spell out the "and" when you're searching that and when you're putting that into the URL bar. Elizabeth, I've had a great time. I can't wait to try those banana spring rolls. My mouth is watering right now.
Good. I hope you enjoy them. And I hope you have a lot of fun making it with kids.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. It's time for another great STEM Tuesday edition of the show. Our Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, Jennifer Swanson, will be here to share with us some great resources that can help us help our kids take a closer look at climate change. That's the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Hey, we want to thank our guest today, Andrea Miller from Halifax, Nova Scotia. Be sure to check out The Day the Buddha Woke Up. We also want to thank Elizabeth Rudd. Make sure you check out Compass and Fork. It is a fantastic website. Also want to thank my amazing producer, Fatima Khan, for everything she does to make the podcast so wonderful. I also have to thank my beautiful wife for all of the support she's been giving me all of our time together. And of course, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for all the support you give this show to help this show become so popular, to spread the word about this show. Thank you so very, very much. Please be sure you subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Himalaya, Stitcher, wherever you find your podcast. And we also want to thank you for the most important thing you do, reading with your kids. We'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.